How many people, from your experience of interviewing people and doing this research, are clear on what their rich life looks like, down to, you know, what you described there, I want to travel for a couple of months a year, and then even further down to which seat I'm going to be in, which class I'm going to be on as I travel?
Less than 1%.
Less than 1% of people know that?
No. Most people literally say, I want to do what I want when I want. That is the extent to which they've thought about a rich life.
Why does it matter to be, what did that less than 1% of people that have that planned out have as an advantage or a benefit from that meticulous thought that the other 99% don't have?
Because they can craft their rich life that is uniquely theirs, almost like getting a handmade glove. And in fact, the more you craft your rich life, the more bewildering it looks to the outside world. So I'll give you an example from my own life. I love to travel. I spend a lot of money when my wife and we'll travel for months at a time. I love hotels. I love the hospitality. I love the details. I love it all. I don't really care about cars. Not at this phase of my life. It's just not that important to me. So when I talk about my money dials or the things that I love to spend money on, I might spend a crazy amount on a hotel per night just because I love it. But I drive a car that's almost 20 years old. It's just not important to me. And I want that. I want to hear in your life what you spend extravagantly on, but then you cut costs mercilessly on, because I want that duality, which indicates you are intentional about your rich life.
What if we're buying things to impress other people and we don't? Because it's hard to, looking in from the outside especially, it's hard to know if someone actually likes Lamborghinis.
Yeah.
Or if they're buying Lamborghinis because they were beat up when they were 9 years old on the playground and they're trying to overcompensate and make the world. And does it matter why they're buying it?
Does it matter? I don't know. First of all, how would we even know? How would they know?
Is there a difference, do you think, just in your opinion, on the impact that purchase has on us, whether we're doing it intrinsically or we're doing it extrinsically? Because I reflect on some of the things that I spent money on and I go, that was for someone else. Whereas there's other things I spend money on, which are maybe health related or travel related, like convenience, flying in a nice class on a plane, which I go, no, that's actually adding a lot of benefit to my life. Whereas that mansion I bought out in the countryside when I was 23 or whatever was a terrible decision. It took me away from my friends because it was an hour and a half outside of the city.
Yeah.
And none of my friends ever came to it. So I was just arriving at midnight after work in this fucking mansion with this tennis court by myself, sleeping for 3 hours and then driving another hour and a half back to the city where all my friends and work were. I go, that was a stupid fucking decision based on extrinsic, external, motivations.
It's a great question. And, particularly in America, we love this idea of ownership. We are taught you've got to own. Owning a house is the best investment. It means you are successful. And if you're renting, no one really says this, but what they deep down say is you're a loser.
Yeah.
Okay. This individualistic strain really runs deep, and it has led a lot of people to make poor financial decisions. First of all, you might be surprised to hear my view is that owning can be a good financial decision, but it also can be a very bad financial decision. In fact, I rent by choice. And living in New York, for example, I lived here for a long time. I knew that if I were to buy, I would be losing thousands of dollars every single month because it actually cost more than twice as much to own than to rent. But can you imagine the type of pressures even I got from people who would come over and say, oh, so do you own this place? The place that I was renting. I said, no, I rent. And there was this visible moment of confusion. They're shaking my hand. They know that I'm the I will teach you to be rich guy, but I rent. How can you be teaching money, but you rent? Isn't renting for losers? And I have to say, because I was rock solid confident in my decision, that pressure did not affect me. But I want to also say that a lot of us buy things based on status. Like the idea that we don't buy things based on what people around us think is nonsense. We buy things based on status. To deny it is absurd. But I do think that for the big purchases in your life, like a house, a car, the big things, you've got to run the numbers. And if you decide, hey, you know what? I want to buy a house, even though it's going to cost me an extra $600,000 in opportunity costs and phantom costs, but I'm going to do it because I like it or it makes me feel good. I say, God bless. But if you simply make decisions based on what other people around you do, then you will discover, like you did, I thought I was going to feel a certain way, and I don't really feel that way. And that, for me, is an opportunity for you to interrogate your own beliefs.
And money is like a personal zero-sum game, right? Like, so I can't just spend indefinitely. So buying that ridiculous house out in the countryside takes away from something which might have genuinely brought me closer to happiness, like, I don't know, going away with my family or whatever it might have been. You talked there about buying property. I find that really curious because the popular narrative is, for most people, the minute they get any decent amount of money is to buy your first house. And that's what people do. They take a 10% deposit or a 20% deposit, whatever it might be, and they buy a house. Why is that a poor investment? Why is that a bad thing to do? Because that does kind of sit counter to the popular narrative.
Well, we have to remember, first of all, where the popular narrative came from. In America, if you ask people what is the American dream, the answer is inextricably tied up with a single family home with a white picket fence. That's not an accident. That is the result of decades of messaging. Some might call it propaganda. First of all, most people in the world do not live in single family homes like we do in America. That has caused a lot of issues. But to leave that part aside, this is how most people think about buying a house. They think, grandma bought a house in Austin, Texas in 1970 for $100,000. Grandma just sold it 50 years later for $1 million. Grandma made $900,000. They go, it's the most profitable thing you could do, buy a house. I go, okay, that sounds really nice. Did Granny factor in how much she spent on maintenance for the past 50 years? No. Did Granny factor in inflation and how that affected her return? No. What's inflation? Did Granny factor in the opportunity costs of what that down payment could have been used if invested in the S&P 500? No. And did Granny look at all these phantom costs such as interest on the loan? No. It's not simply the bigger number minus the smaller number. That's wrong. That is simplistic. For the biggest purchase of your life, you've got to go deeper. Again, when I was living here, I kept a very close eye on real estate. And the place right next to me, same square footage, same number of bedrooms, same everything, it would have cost 2.2 times what I was paying in rent. So just to give you an example, if I was paying $3,000 a month, it would have cost about $6,400 a month to own. Okay. I said, you know what? I like renting. If I have a problem, I just text my landlord. I took the $3,400 I would have spent owning when factoring in phantom costs, maintenance, interest, taxes, all that, and I simply invested it. And I made more money doing that than I would have owning.
What about if you're buying somewhere for the rental income?
That can work. So owning real estate as an investment can be part of a well-diversified portfolio if you run the numbers. Right now, there's a lot of hype. People go, I'm going to buy a house, and if I don't like it or whatever, I'm just going to rent it out. Okay, fine. But you've got to remember that if your mortgage is $1,000, that's not just the amount you're paying. There's a lot more. In fact, in my estimations, I add 50% to that price. So $1,500 a month, which would include a roof repair happening 19 years from now. We've got to amortize that out. Labor costs, interest, all that. If you can rent it out and make a profit, fantastic. It cash flows, that's awesome. What you discover is that most people who buy a primary residence, the place they want to live in, they buy it because they want it, and then they tell themselves it's an investment. Buying a house can be an investment, but oftentimes it's not. And there are far better, far simpler investments. Here's my key message. I want to make sure nobody misunderstands me. I've been accused of saying buying a house is bad. No, I never said that. In fact, I will buy a house myself one day. And when I do, it's going to be a terrible financial decision, and I'm going to do it anyway. My key message is, for the biggest purchase of your life, you've got to run the numbers. Sometimes buying can be a good financial decision. Often renting can be a good financial decision. Run the numbers and never feel guilty for renting.
As it relates to buying a house,